Okay, so my office hours are going to be a little bit modified today. It's Carol Trosclair, if you've ever heard that name before, but her husband passed away this weekend, so I'm going to go to the funeral, pay my respects to her. That's the family that started the Trosclair Memorial Scholarships for us, and David was a student of mine uh, many moons ago. So I'm gonna try to be back in my office around 10:15 or so, if anybody wants to meet and has any questions, okay? All right, let's push forward. We got some major muscles of the shoulder, finish off our shoulder circles, and then we'll try to do some examples. Wednesday and Friday will be scapula. Just giving you a heads up, I would, you can do whatever you want, but I would look ahead at one of my past lectures, all of my lectures. I got hundreds and hundreds of videos. The scapula is a different view. Just giving you a heads up because the scapula is not a true joint. It's an articulation floating around the vertebra. So our view of the muscles are better served from a posterior view so that we can see muscles that are pulling towards the spine, away from the spine, up, down, and trying to spin it up and down. So it's just giving you a heads up. That last circle is a posterior view, not a cross section. All right, guys, this is my favorite muscle in the body because I've heard it talked about in a lecture. So about 20-something years ago when I was at NC State, an ortho gave a lecture on skeletal muscles, and he said, what do you think is the most important muscle to sport? And I mean, it could be anything, but his vote was for the latissimus dorsi, and his rationale was the coverage area. This is a muscle that had worked on, look at that, it has fascia on the pelvis, the spine, crosses the scapula to get to the shoulder. It's a lot of surface area. It's a lot of coverage. So in class, we're going to just talk about what traditionally the lat is looked for, shoulder, but I want you guys to know that the scapula is also involved, the latissimus dorsi is also involved in scapula stuff. And the latissimus dorsi is also involved in trunk stuff. Okay, but scratch it. So let's look at how it crosses the shoulder joint. I think this is a really good view of its medial crossing, right? It would be an adduction puller based off of this view, trying to pull the humerus down. This view is the one that I'm going to use for the internal rotation pull. So remember from last class, a lady between two majors. So this middle strip on the humerus is the latissimus dorsi, the lati. So if you imagine that muscle is coming from the back, literally from your back, and it's crossing the shoulder and attaching to the front right here. So based off of its pull, it would be an internal rotator at the shoulder. Does that make sense? So for this one, again, two-dimensional pictures don't show three-dimensional concepts. So we have to utilize the view of depth. We have to imagine that muscle coming from the back to the front, and if it pulls, it would want to roll that shoulder internal. Internal rotation pull. This is another view of it from the opposite side. Now, this little ghost light, that's because the muscle is going to disappear as it goes to the front of the humerus, so it's showing you where it would pull on the other side of the humerus. Does that make sense? So this is coming from the back to the front, and again, based off of its pull, it's trying to do this to the shoulder. It's trying to be an internal rotation pull. And again, your logic is sound, but we already have the pectoralis major. We have the anterior deltoid. That seems pretty strong. You've got the subscapularis, latissimus. That sounds like we have a lot of things that are trying to internal rotation. And the answer is yeah. Think of it like this. Internal rotation to us is a catapult. You think about about those medieval catapults trying to sling things? Well, for our species, we developed the ability to catapult from a distance. We can do damage from a distance. The reason baseball, softball people can throw objects so fast is because they have a lot of muscles, a lot of force that can speed up their catapults. Makes sense. It's important to speed up that catapult to make it go fast. So we have a lot of big, strong muscles that are there trying to leverage the internal rotation, speeding up the internal rotation. So again, here's another view of the latissimus dorsi. Look at that coverage area. Just asking, can you see how the left latissimus dorsi would pull in the same direction as the left erector spinal at the trunk? Frontally, the left would also try to pull left shoulder to left. So again, grad school stuff. But again, it's just based off of it. So the latissimus dorsi, also in the sagittal plane, because it comes from posterior to anterior, I'm trying to find the best picture that would show this. So the little knob would be where it inserts on that lati slot. So because the muscle is coming from posterior to anterior, that's why it would be an extension puller sagittally, if that makes sense. Trying to pull the shoulder, trying to pull the front of the shoulder where it inserts to the back where it originates. Make sense? So shoulder extension, that's why when you're doing these kind of exercises, you feel it in the legs. Shoulder extension, pull, shoulder adduction, pull, shoulder internal rotation, pull. If you look at your circles, you'll see those three pulls all laid out. Latissimus dorsi, extensor, adductor, internal rotator. I introduced you to the concept of sister muscles. It's a term they use in kinesiology for muscles that have the same function at a given joint. Coracobrachialis has the same function at the shoulder as the biceps brachiosaurus. The peroneus longus and brevis have the same function at the ankle and subtalar. So if you notice, you have the latissimus dorsi, and then this muscle right here that darn looks the same in terms of how it's crossing and how it's pulling. And that's called the teres major. A lady between two majors, latissimus dorsi between pectoralis major and teres major. I'm going to talk to you about the teres major. There's left dorsi, and there is teres major. Now the teres major sounds like a rotator cuff muscle. That's because we have a teres minor. So don't get those things confused. Remember, the purpose of the rotator cuff muscle is to encapsulate the golf ball and try to make sure it stays on the golf tee. Independently, they have their own rotational pulls, but I've taught you muscles aren't just there for motion, they're also there for stability. So collectively, they help. The teres major doesn't pull on the golf ball. The teres major pulls on the shaft of the humerus itself, so that's why it has a torque, it has a moment to pull, unlike these guys that are just pulling on the head, and their torque and moment is limited to either rotational or the fact the supraspinatus goes over the top. It has a moment for abduction. So a lady between two majors, latissimus dorsi, pectoralis major, there's the teres major. So the teres major isn't coming from way down. I'll make a Lord of the Rings reference, but my 310 class didn't know any of my old references, so I'm just going to say the latissimus dorsi, big muscle coming from far away, but the teres major is just coming from the scapula. It's coming from the scapula, crossing the shoulder, medial, meaning it's going to pull in the direction of adduction, posterior to anterior, so it's going to pull in the direction of extension. just like the latissimus dorsi. It has the same crossing of the shoulder. Now, obviously, the teres major doesn't do all the extra stuff that the latissimus dorsi does because the lat comes from the pelvis up to that insertion point in the shoulder. But at the shoulder, they have the same functions, so they're commonly referred to as sister muscles. So on the test, common question is, which of the following is not a rotator cuff muscle or something like that? And so teres minor, teres major. The minor is, the major, excuse me, is not. Again, two-dimensional pictures are hard to show three-dimensional concepts. On that picture on the left, you have to see how the muscle would be going posterior to anterior. Like you just see a flat picture, but the scapula is behind the insertion of the humerus, which is in the front. So that's why I would have a posterior pull, because it's going from back to front. All right, guys, let's double check all of our boxes. We have done subscapularis, rotator cuff muscle, that's an internal rotator covering our front base of our golf tee. We talked about teres minor and infraspinatus, our double play combo that's covering the backside of the golf ball on the backside of the posterior. Supraspinatus covering the front over the top, covering over the top of the golf ball. In terms of a force couple, the supraspinatus would be trying to pull in and up, but the other rotator cuff muscles are trying to pull in and down so they can work as a force couple. And linearly, they're all trying to keep the stability of the glenohumeral joint by drawing it in. How many muscles make up the left deltoid? One. Good. It's one muscle. Bless you. It has three different parts. You have anterior fibers, you have middle fibers, you have posterior fibers. All of the fibers of a fan-shaped muscle have to have at least one thing in common. In other words, you can't have, if they didn't have something in common, they wouldn't be the same muscle. Kind of common sense, right? So what do they have in common? All of the fibers are abduction poles. They're all abductors. The anterior fibers are abductors, flexors, and internal rotators. The posterior are abductors, extensors, and lateral or external rotators. When you just need the deltoid to work as a whole muscle, the anterior fibers cancel out the posterior sagittally and transversely, and they can work synergistically frontally. Biceps brachii, two heads. One head crosses straight anterior, short head, shoulder flexion forward. The other crosses anterolateral. So it's a flexor and an abductor. That is the long head. Coracobrachialis, a muscle that goes from the coracoid process to the brachial part of the arm, crosses the shoulder in the front, shoulder flexor, sister muscle to the biceps brachii, short head. Same function in the shoulder. We talked about the pectoralis major, all of the fibers in anatomical position. Adductor, internal rotation pullers. It's a midway type muscle. It can switch function based off of position. When you're below 90 degrees, it's an adductor, but when you're above 90 degrees, it's an abductor. It's still pulling your arm to your thorax. But if you're down here, the shortest distance is going to be this way. And if you're up here, the shortest distance is going to be that. Muscles don't have, when we talk about muscle listed as an adductor because that's how you are in anatomical position. Triceps brachii long head, shoulder adductor. And then finally, latissimus dorsi, shoulder adductor, shoulder extensor, internal rotator, and its sister muscle, the teres major, which has the same function. Let me show you. Okay. For the purposes of this class, we're going to keep horizontal. So like if we do, we're going to try to keep it simple. When you're in this position, the horizontal adduction pullers, I think the pectoralis major kind of makes sense that we want to pull across, right? So for the purposes of this class, we'll say pectoralis major and anterior deltoid has a pull that would be cross when you're in this position. And we'll also keep it simple and say, well, if the pectoralis major is trying to pull your arm anterior, then the latissimus dorsi and the posterior deltoid, we try to pull horizontal ab. So we'll keep it simple. A big one and a complementary fan, big one and a complementary fan. Pec anterior pull horizontal ad, lat and posterior horizontal ab. And you say, well, wouldn't the teres major? Yeah, I'm just not going to ask you. Just telling you the ones I could ask you if we were doing a fly exercise. So those are the ones I would, the ones that are kind of common sense. If you were arm wrestling for fun, would you be using your internal rotators or external rotators while you wrestle your friend? And if you start losing, would that be eccentric or concentric contraction? Eccentric, yeah. And if you start winning, it'd be concentric. Good. Let's do some shoulder practice. Okay, let's do shoulder muscles, frontal plane. If the arms were like reverse grip and closer, then we could do sagittal, right? But because the arms are out, we're going to go frontal. So let's analyze either shoulder abs or ads. You have to figure out which ones I'm using. And then associate the motion, not for different muscles, to bigger the track. Open it and talk about it. Hey guys, would we need shoulder ab or ads in this exercise? At AD, we would need adduction pullers, right? Because gravity is trying to abduct us. Your lists or your circles are just, again, I have no problem if you just can see all the pictures and all the textbooks and just know. I'm just telling you, sometimes those muscles weaving in and out, it's hard to see their crossings. So whatever technique you use, I just want you to be able to tell me the prime movers, the major adductors of the shoulder. So the adduction front, left, right? Well, you would need adductors, both left to right and right to left. You need the regardless. When you observe adduction as from left to right, those muscles would be working constantly. But when you see the abduction from right to left, it wouldn't be different muscles. You wouldn't be pushing yourself down, right? It'd be the same. Eccentric contraction. Same muscles, different contraction. That's what I'm trying to train our brains. We started off in 310, but now we're really trying to develop and master the specific muscles that pull in specific directions that allow specific motions to specific contractions. Okay. So let's talk about the primary adduction pulls. Lat, right? Teres major. What triceps, brachii, long head. And remember, sometimes these muscles, I'm giving them to you, it's not as if the tricep is like handling business the most, but it is contributing. And a lot of it is the fact that it can contribute and really help that stability of that humeral head that's kind of in a vulnerable position because of all the motion, right? Was that? Yes. So let's specifically talk about when the pectoralis major can turn on, right? So the pectoralis major is limited to shoulder position, right? So this initial motion may not be able to get your pectoralis major going, but right after you break right after you break 90 degrees, because remember up here, the pectoralis major is trying to yank you this way. So you have your lat that's really focusing in, doing most of the work. We got that teres major, we got that tricep. But after you get past 90, then the pectoralis major is like, yeah, second wind to really kind of help get you from here to there. Does that make sense? So it would be like brachioradialis, where if you remember all the practice we did, we had the all the time pronators and supinators, and then the other question was, well, can it? So for me, if I ask you lat, if I ask you teres major, if I ask you tricep, then it doesn't matter. But if I ask you a pectoralis major question, I would be more likely to say, the picture on the right, can the pectoralis major help me to hold that position isometrically? Yeah. You see how it would, right? Or I would give you a before and after that didn't cross that 90 degree. It would literally like either start here to there or go from here to there. It would be very specific to make sure we're on the same page about when the pec can or can't help that group. While we're here, let's do elbows. Would I need elbow flexors or extensors? What's the exercise trying to do to my elbows? Yeah. So triceps, medial and lateral head, take a little break, be antagonist. And my shoulder flexors, my elbow flexors, brachialis, biceps brachii, brachioradialis. It kind of makes sense. If you do some assisted pull-ups, in my case, or some regular pull-ups, you kind of feel a little pump at your elbows. So that exercise is trying to extend you. All right, let's do some simpler ones. Let's go left to right. This is what we're trying to work against. You observe adduction, but I don't want your brain to go right to, oh, I must be using adductors. Tale as old as time. The examples might be vast, but the process is the same. What's those dumbbells trying to do to my shoulder? AD Duggan, good. I don't need muscles to do that. I mean, you can literally do the thought experiment. If I use muscles, it's going the same way. I'm literally yanking the dumbbells down and smashing against my thigh. And with my thighs, I don't want to break the dumbbells. Bad joke, guys. Bad joke. So I need abduction pullers. We did that in 310. Now we're just saying, well, who are the muscles that pull that way? Who are the major muscles that pull that way? Our deltoid, any order, doesn't matter. Deltoid, our supraspinatus, absolutely. And that long head of the bicep, and I think I can't catch it, that the long head of the bicep and the supraspinatus are kind of crisscross buddies at the shoulder. So they kind of both, it's really kind of neat how they both work. And I also mentioned, it's not going to be in your test, I just think sometimes y'all want to know cool stuff. When your supraspinatus is impinged and hurt, that rotator cuff muscle, your bicep is going to do more of that abduction roll and overhead work. And if you don't fix the problem after a while, then your bicep's going to be, it's like compensating for a bad habit with another bad habit. Eventually, that's going to show itself. Okay, concentric or eccentric from left to right? Good, good. And then from right to left, same muscles. Same muscles, different motion with different contractions. Absolutely. Good. How about okay, what if let's play more specific with questions. I'm going to give you answer choices. So write down, don't even, or try not to look at the question. Just write down these choices. Like we're doing a practice test. We're doing a test at first. Okay. Answer choice number 1, anterior deltoid through concentric contraction. Answer choice number 2, anterior deltoid through eccentric contraction. Answer choice number 3, posterior deltoid through concentric contraction. I guess you could figure out where answer choice 4 is going to be. Posterior deltoid through eccentric. Okay. Now we have our answer choices. I'm going to wait until you have them all, because I haven't given you the question yet, so I really haven't spoiled anything. Anterior deltoid through concentric, anterior deltoid through eccentric, posterior deltoid through concentric, posterior deltoid through eccentric. Those are options. Okay, we're all good with the options. Now here's the question. You start on the right and you go from right to left. So this is my start. This is my finish. And you tell me which of those answer choices matches the agonistic muscle that I listed and the contraction type. We're gonna try to do a few practices like it's worded on the test. See if that helps. How many of you got it right away? Good. And again, it's okay if you don't. I just want you to get it. I want you to get it. I want us to practice pacing ourselves, so that way I don't put too many questions on the test. I don't put too few questions on the test. I want to put, like Goldilocks, man, I want to get it just right. It was like 9 from left to right, anterior deltoid through concentric contraction. So on your paper, if you're still struggling through the process, maybe we do elimination, maybe we do a process of elimination. You know this exercise, you won't need posterior delt. So anything that says posterior, you're like, oh, not today, Satan. So it gives you a chance, even if you're kind of wonky, a word I learned from Dr. Weimer at Auburn, it gives you a chance. It gives you a 50-50 chance. If you're struggling with contraction, at least you can eliminate what you don't need as an agonist, right? Okay. All right, how about, do you guys like me coming up with answer choices? You'd like that? Okay. What I want us to work towards is showing the pattern of how I come up with answer choices. So that way when I'm not around, you can come up with answer choices for each other. Because it's really just pick a muscle and a contraction. Just make sure you flip flop. An agonist and a contraction, and an antagonist and a contraction. Flip flop. Same muscles with different contraction. Okay, how about this? I don't know what these things are called, so sometimes I just gotta. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Collagen. All right, guys, here's your answer choices. You don't know the question yet, so I'm not giving you anything. Answer choices are the exact same as the first one. So we have anterior deltoid concentric, anterior deltoid eccentric, posterior deltoid concentric, posterior deltoid eccentric. And for the question, we're going to go left to right. Now, one way you can do some extra practice is to have the exact same questions, but just swap out different muscles. You know what I mean? So like for the first one, instead of anterior deltoid, just swap it out with upper pec, you know, or biceps break by short hip. So it's, you can do that as well as practice different muscles. As a bonus question, which muscles would be working at the elbow isometrically as a state, as a neutralizer? In other words, to make the arm stay as one rigid link, as we call it in biomechanics. So what group of muscles would be working at the elbow isometrically to make sure that arm stays straight? That's a bonus extra question we talk about. Remember, this is why I said that a lot of times a certain muscle gets credit for shoulder motion. If you feel it when you do certain things, but it's really just turned on to keep the elbow straight. It's working more at the elbow than the shoulder. Intercept. Okay, I don't want to rush too fast. Are we good? Are we ready for the conversation? Or does anybody need more time? Okay, from left to right, posterior deltoid working concentrically, with concentric contraction. And you would really need those elbow extensors, the KNES and the triceps brachii, to work isometrically to prevent gravity from flexing. That's why you feel it in the triceps so much when you do an exercise like this. It's not because those muscles are necessarily influencing motion in the shoulder. It's because those muscles are sweating their rear off trying to keep that elbow extended. You have this big fork that's trying to feed you, trying to flex you. Okay. What about muscles at the wrist? for practice, since this kind of goes, I say goes against, but you know, your circles, your circles aren't perfect. When you do a static circle, you have to pick a position because it's not dynamic, and so we pick the anatomical position. So that's where you're going to have to either make note in your circle, or you can just visually kind of see how this would work. But when you're in an abducted position, it makes sense that a horizontal adductor is going to pull this way and a horizontal abductor is going to pull the other way. So that's why I said, hey guys, on the test, I'm just going to hold you accountable for pec and anterior delt being the primary horizontal abduction pullers, and lat posterior delt being the horizontal abduction. So let's do this. Let's go from, so your answer choices, sorry. So let's keep it consistent. Your answer choices is pectoralis major concentric, pectoralis major eccentric, latissimus dorsi concentric, latissimus dorsi eccentric. Well, you don't know the question yet. I just want to make sure we had the answer choices. And then once everybody has the choices, then I'll give you the question. Two choices. Okay, I'm going to give you, just like last question, I'm going to give you two questions. I'm going to give you the standard agonist and contraction. Then I'm going to give you a bonus. Where would the plyometric sequence be happening? When her arms are together or when her arms are furthest apart? And remember, we're not claiming weights, okay? We are going to influence motion through our muscles. So let's go left to right, since that was suggested. Left to right. So our choices are pectoralis major concentric, pectoralis major eccentric, latissimus dorsi concentric, latissimus dorsi eccentric. And a bonus question, where would the plyometric sequence be at when the hands are closest together or when the hands are furthest apart? Remember the plyometric sequence, slowing down motion from the agonist to the eccentric, immediately followed by speeding up motion in the same direction forward concentric. Give that some thought. So that you guys don't have to hunt it, would anybody be interested in me emailing a past lecture on scapular muscles or other findings? We're almost done, you guys. Are y'all gonna miss me? Liars. It's like me asking my boys, y'all gonna miss me when you move up the house? Yeah. Okay, left to right, pectoralis major through concentrics. Good. And the plyometric sequence, sorry, Mr. Dorr, the plyometric sequence would be when the arms are furthest apart. Because it takes that pec and that anterior deltoid to slow down your horizontal ab through eccentrics, change your direction and speed up the horizontal ab through concentric. Another way to see this, guys, it can't be here because to get to here, you have to have concentric contraction to get to here. And the plyometric sequence isn't concentric followed by eccentric. The only place that has that sequence, eccentric followed by concentric, is here. Another way to look at it. If we did right to left, since you already have your answer choices, same muscle, pectoralis major, but it would be eccentrics from right to left. You would be shocked at how many 310, and I guess 415 students too. I mean, y'all are my regulars, but would tell me, and their bodies know better. What they would say, I'm working pec when I do this, and I'm working lat when I do that. Because they just see motion, and they want to link up a muscle with a motion. But what happens is they end up linking muscles with emotion, and we got to take emotions out. Y'all want one more? We'll do one more. Psycho Notions 11. Want one more? Okay. Okay, here are your answer choices. I haven't given you the question yet. It's like kinesiology Jeopardy. Subscapularis concentric, subscapularis eccentric. Infraspinatus concentric, infraspinatus eccentric. Back in the day before I mellowed out, I used to put none of these for every single question. And I would have answers that were not. But too many students would, bless their hearts, going down the rabbit hole for too long. I was like, look, as a sign of good faith. Okay, let's go right to left. Now remember, guys, don't pattern recognize. The left to right's always concentric, and right to left's like, it might be. Remember the lateral raise one? Like that one, left to right is eccentric. We can't just assume. We can infer. So for this one, let's go right to left. And let me know which agonist or which contraction. After a few seconds of thought. So old Brian would put supraspinatus concentric and put caries major. Then to mellow out. That's what we do with kids. Firstborn, you try to protect them from everything. The next born, you let them juggle knives. It's amazing how it works. So, you guys get juggle knives. Are we past going through the process of identifying the agonist, or do you still want me to do that? Okay. Got it. What's this exercise trying to do to my shoulder? Internally rotate me. You don't have to do it like me, but my way has been working for a few years. I like to eliminate, process of elimination. If the exercise is trying to internally rotate me, I don't need muscles that are trying to internally rotate me and literally throwing the band across. So I eliminate who I don't need to see who I do need. I need external rotation. In this case, I gave you one of those muscles, infraspinatus, from right to left. The infraspinatus, being an external rotator, would allow internal rotation through eccentrics. And I've said it before, and this will be the last thing I say, because I got to go to the funeral. But the reason we do what we do is to translate muscles based off of pull with motion based off of motion to the same language. Because again, infraspinatus, what does that mean? knowing what it means is knowing how it pulls. It's an external rotator. I need external rotators because I see why I need them. And if I need external rotators and I see internal rotation, that has to be through the eccentrics. It translates it to a language of math that we can do math with. But if I don't have all those numbers looking like numbers, how can I do math? If some of it's numbers and some of it's Egyptian hieroglyph, I don't know what that means. I have to translate it into the same language for me to make sense of it. That make sense? All right, guys, we'll see Wednesday. I'll send out that schedule link. If you don't hear from me, I just forgot. Somebody send me a courtesy message or email, and I'll send it out right away.